As long ago as at the middle or thereabouts of the 18th century, a great man of the theater, the German Lessing, said at that time, "We have great actors, but we have no art of acting," by which he meant we do not understand how it is achieved, and we do not know what happens when it is not achieved. Because here is the art problem in the actor's problem. Not that we have not had it, but that the very people who exemplified the art of acting at its best, the great actors, were the very people who most suffered from an inability to know what made them great. Why were they great on some occasions? And why, in the very same part, on another occasion, it didn't go?
I'm Margaret Croydon for Camera 3. Finding a method for developing an actor's technique has always been a problem. An actor's approach to acting has frequently depended upon how he felt the night of the performance. Even some of the greatest actors have relied on intuition and inspiration alone, hoping that if they failed one night, they would surely be better the next. For in the past, actors did not attend a training school. They learned their trade by working at it. But apprenticeship was not always fruitful. What the ordinary actor learned was a set of cliches to indicate to an audience an emotional state. Anger was expressed by stamping a foot, sorrow by dabbing a handkerchief to a dry eye, and anguish by tearing one's hair. But all this was challenged when in 1898, an actor named Stanislavski and a director named Nemirovich Danchenko met in the back room of a Moscow restaurant and decided to form their own ensemble, the now famous Moscow Art Theater. This company was to abolish the star system and replace it with ensemble actors who could produce emotion on stage based on fidelity to real life. The actors were to be trained so that they could develop carefully thought out characterizations. By the 1920s and the 30s, the name of Stanislavski began to be heard all over European and American theater circles. For Stanislavski had by that time written An Actor Prepares, replete with exercises and discussions of his approach to acting. Influenced by what was considered then the most radical theater development, a group of Americans, fed up with the artificiality of the commercial theater, formed in 1931 an ensemble called the Group Theater, based on the Stanislavski aesthetic. It, too, wanted to abolish the star system and concentrate on a new and more authentic acting style. The group went away together in the summer. They studied, organized, and produced some of the best productions New York had ever seen. Although the group didn't last, its actors, directors, and teachers did. Elia Kazan, Harold Clurman, Robert Lewis, Stella Adler, Morris Karnofsky, and Lee Strasberg, one of its founders, went their own way, all to influence the course of the American theater. Perhaps the name of Lee Strasberg stands out more than any other. Not only was he one of the original founders of the group, but as teacher, actor, director, and now head of the famous actor studio, he has been mentor to hundreds of actors who have flocked to his classes. But most of all, Lee Strasberg is especially identified with the Stanislavski approach to acting, now called the method. Strasberg has been teaching, explaining, directing, and writing about the method for almost 50 years. And this indeed is an unsurpassed record. Lee, what led you to choose the Stanislavski method as your principal method to train actors with?
People always think that you arrive at that by a very definite kind of decision. Often it chooses you. That is, the experience that you go through convinces you of something which you then go into. And in that sense, I must say I became aware of the problem of the actor by seeing things on the stage that showed me what actors were capable of doing, and also showed me that they were not necessarily capable of doing it at their will whenever they wanted to. Then I saw the Moscow Art Theater in the flesh, not in books. And I saw that there they seemed to have some kind of procedure that made it possible for every actor on the stage to be able to do more or less within limits what he was capable of doing. That convinced me that they had something which it was worth my investigating.
What'd you do? Did you go to Moscow to study?
No.
So how did you begin?
Well, I found my way here accidentally, actually. I owe it to a young man whose name I unfortunately don't know. I remember that he came from Boston, and he studied in the same school that I studied in when I had decided first to become a professional actor. It was called the Clare Tree Major School of the Theater. And I had been there for a few months, working on Shakespeare and Sheridan, so on, things like that. And we weren't quite satisfied with the procedures, and so it wasn't bad because I learned things. And he knew that I was looking for some other place. And this was in 1924. The Moscow Art Theater had already been here in 1923. But I didn't know that some of the people from the Moscow Art Theater had remained. And he came and he told me, yesterday, he said, I went to a place that I think you would like. It turned out to be the American Laboratory Theater, which was run by Richard Boleslavsky, the director, and Maria Ospinskaya, the wonderful actress. I went there, and sure enough, it was what I had been looking for.
When you began teaching, did you follow Stanislavski absolutely to the letter?
Any kind of approach in any artistic area can never be rules. It can be principles. And principles, you must learn how to make use of it. You must learn how to apply. So it always is not following the letter, but what is intended by the procedure, by the principle. I would say that we added a certain clarification of the basic theory. Stanislavski was not a theoretician, fortunately. He was a practical man, and everything that he did came only from his practice, something that I hope to describe on some occasion, because too many people think, well, it comes from sitting around, making up your mind. No, everything that came to him as a result of his own problems, of what he saw about the problems that actors had, about what he saw other actors do, and therefore questioned what helps them to do that and so on. As a result of that, he came to certain conclusions. He then tried those conclusions, as in a way later I did. If they worked, fine. When they didn't work, then either it was wrong or something had to be corrected and so on. Now, in the same way, I tried all the work, and rightly or wrongly, whether it's Stanislavski or not, it works. I think it's Stanislavski in the sense that I would like to give, due, gratitude for the work. That's where I think I got it from.
Lee, do you think the method is the only way to train actors?
I believe the method is the only basic means for solving what I consider to be the actor's problem. That does not mean that there are then not additional means that may be valuable for some particular function or for some particular results that you wish to achieve. For instance, you are an opera singer. Well, obviously, the opera singer must, in addition to his acting training, which I firmly believe in, by the way, and think opera singers should make use of, he also must be able to sing vocally. And that's a very special both gift, talent, and also training in addition to everything else. If you're going to play a part in which you need dialect, and by the way, that doesn't mean just Shakespearean, because it's just as difficult to do an Italian dialect or a German dialect or anything like that. You must have some particular skill. There are many actors, are good actors, they cannot do that particular thing. That's additional training, you see. And that training is by no means to be sneezed at, as long as people do not assume that they are solving an acting problem, the basic acting problem. The basic acting problem is how to believe in what he's doing, to believe enough in order to be able to transmit that belief to the public.
To young people, Lee Strasberg is a mythic character, and they continue to flock to his classes. Here, Strasberg, in his favorite role at the Strasberg Institute, is teaching the untutored the basic fundamentals of the method.
We have enough. 2, 4, 5, one more, fine. Okay. Funny, usually the girls are much more enterprising. How come you let the men get away from it? Then you complain, huh? Okay. Here is what I want you to do. Very simple, nothing very difficult, and it's almost no acting, so you don't have to worry about it. I just want you to do no more than walk around this stage and keep walking till I tell you to stop. Okay, go ahead. And watch carefully, because I cannot point out now, so only after it's over can I point out. Therefore, you have to be observant so that you know what I will be referring to later. By the way, this is not bad at all. Now, hold it now for a minute. Now, do you people go to the movies a little more often than I do? I would like to go to the movies, but I'm so busy that I have movies piled up. I could go every day for 2 weeks to see most of the movies that I've missed and that I would like to see. Would you say that you've seen about 10, 12 movies? Good. What I want you to do is, I want you to think of the movies that you have seen, the name of the movies, of course, the people that are in it, who, if possible, directed it, that's right, what the movie was about, whether you liked it or not, so that at the end of the time, I'll give you a few minutes. If I ask you, you can then give me 1 movie, 2 movies, 3 movies, 4, and say I had more. If you want, I'll tell you more. So that we know that you have been trying to think of the movies, right? So that you have 10, 12 movies to begin with, and then, in addition to thinking of the names of the movies, you can tell me what the movie was about, or at least the people that were in it, if possible, the director, other people that were in the thing, and so on and so forth, right? Not too difficult to do, right? Okay, continue to walk. Now, something interesting has begun to take place, except with one individual, and even there it's beginning to change. You noticed at the beginning they were walking around all so on. I told them walk, so they walked. Now look, did I say anything about walking differently? Did I say walk more naturally? Did I say walk more at ease? I didn't say anything. I just said think. And yet they're walking differently. Why? How come they're walking differently? I didn't say change the walk. I didn't give any acting instructions. All I said was think of something. All I said was give your concentration something that you can really be concerned with. And what has happened? Now watch. Anything that I said this was, if you didn't know what the exercise was, you would say yes. If I said they're all waiting for a plane, you say, gee, they all seem bothered, disturbed. What are they disturbed about? Yeah, that's right. Anything that I would say, because once the walk is real, and once the people seem concerned with something that they have on their minds, we begin to get reality on the stage. And mind you, I said nothing about acting, and I said nothing about walking. That's the important thing. Which means that the thing that conditions the actor is not what you tell them to do in terms of acting. If you told them walk differently, they would walk differently and perhaps just as self-consciously, just as uneasy. They would walk, if I told them to walk slower, they would walk slower, and then they would look around and see, am I walking slow enough, and so on and so forth. They would be concerned with the walk. Now, they're not concerned with the walk, and yet the walk has changed. And I didn't tell them anything about changing the walk, which shows that when you appeal to the actor's concentration, to his thought, you affect, therefore, his behavior.
Because I was not familiar with the play, and I'm not very familiar with any of the ancient Greek tragedies or any of the ancient Greek plays at all. So
an old church in the West 40s has been converted into a now famous building. For over 30 years, Lee Strasberg meets members of the Actors Studio here for his weekly critical sessions. To the public, the studio may be a mysterious place. To Lee Strasberg and his actors, it's a place for them to develop their technique.
Trying to trying to understand where her head was at.
All right, now let's for a moment get away from that, because the actor has is too much inclined, usually, always to start with the word. And as you probably know, there is a distinct position in the theater that takes that as a basis. The word is what you start with. The English actor, I mean, people like Tyrone Guthrie and other people like that, theoretically, actually proclaim that. You don't have to worry about anything. You just say the words, and what the author is getting at will come out. Obviously, they can't quite mean it in this simplified form, but nonetheless, it is literally true that they do emphasize the actor's concern with the word as the basic activity and concern of the actor. We theoretically take a different position in principle. We say it is what the actor does that conditions the way in which he will speak. The same word with a different activity will assume different meaning.
The Actors Studio was founded in 1947 by Elia Kazan, Cheryl Crawford, and Robert Lewis. At first, only 50 professional actors were invited. Later, the roster grew to more than 100. When in 1949, Robert Lewis resigned, Kazan invited Lee Strasberg to head the studio, a post Strasberg has held for more than a quarter of a century. The studio is not a place for production, though they put on Three Sisters and a number of other plays in the past. But it is a place for practical and theoretical work. Almost 3 generations of actors have been trained in the method at the studio. Actors such as Marlon Brando, Marilyn Monroe, Jimmy Dean, Maureen Stapleton, Lee Grant, Paul Newman, and Shelley Winters have passed through studio doors. Some came when they were on the brink of stardom. Others came when they were already stars and wanted to increase their creative powers. But the majority of actors who came to the studio have gone off on their own as directors, actors, and teachers to carry out the practical applications of the method. The Actors Studio continues, not as a producing company, as some would like to have it, but as a home and a place to work for those who need it. Here you see 2 actors who have just completed a scene from Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, in which Vanya has declared his love to Elena, only to be rejected.
Now, what do you mean when you say, therefore it didn't quite go you where you wanted it? You're implying that you had set yourself to create a certain type of a response to her, which would involve some element of foolishness in the behavior, without making an effort to be foolish, obviously, but none.
I didn't want that, but what I did find during the rehearsals was that she was often very sad, very tearful. And I tried to find ways to make her laugh. My ways, of course, you know, I don't know any other ways, you know. I tried to find ways to make her laugh.
Very good.
Now, I didn't try, well, let me see how foolish I can be. I just tried to be
how much you
funny.
can make her laugh.
I wanted to be funny for her, make her like me more, too, hopefully. A funny man is, you know, better than a dull man. See, I realized the other things that we worked on the first time, too, and I didn't put them aside this time. However, like the problem that I feel he's going through in this age, the kind of a realization time, or, you know, like kind of, well, the mid-40s thing, I know I've already...
Yeah, that's a general thing. Can you, in your own mind, be a little bit more precise and specific about what exactly is happening? When you tell me the thing that everybody knows, you know, that you're in love and you're foolish, and then in the 40s or thereabouts, things happen. That's a generalization. And even when it happens, it usually is the result of something that touches us off, that ticks it off. Now, what exactly? Just give me almost a simple, logical sequence.
Simple sequence?
Yeah. Why is this happening outside the fact that you know it's happening? So you say, since it's happening, you say, well, you know, it's the 40s. Obviously, he's beginning to realize something about age. So therefore, you say he's beginning to realize something about age. And we all understand what that means. So therefore, that's what I do. But that's not the way a reality takes place.
I tried to work on that tiredness.
Yeah.
time of the day. I tried to work on the relationship, how I felt about him and the two men, especially the two men. See, because I feel like somehow they seem to have something that I don't have. He has her, and Michael has more of her attention somehow than I have. So I feel like they're rivals, and I feel like they're both, they're both hitting better than I am. They're both hitting 400. I mean, something like 250.
What about you in terms of what you were working for?
I guess mostly the thing I love about it is that because of my Russian background, I feel free to use everything that I always feel is wrong,
As for instance?
The place. It's, to me, I've used a very Russian place that I, was as a child for a while with my grandmother. It's a different samovar, different music. Everything about it is I think, the fun of, instead of in some way always having to do character work to do a Neil Simon or an Odette's, it's like, for me, who I am. About Astrov, you pointed out in the monologue that she's in love but doesn't know she's in love. And that's in this scene, too, whenever she talks about it.
It was given away too much in this scene. I mean, with the way you smiled and let yourself dream about when you spoke about him. No, if you're talking to him, you say, the doctor is really quite fascinating. You know how we speak without realizing? Strange man. Really is quite strange. It's funny, I don't know why I'm so embarrassed with him, It's, no, but once you say, he's a strange man, so on, I don't know why I'm so embarrassed. Well, I say, what do you mean you don't know? Come on.
Why don't you let us see what they're doing then in the studio? Why don't you open to the public and let, or at least some to the profession? Nobody knows what's happening.
To the profession, we do open it, yes. There is what we call professional courtesy to the profession. To the public, no. Because in that sense, in line with the statement that I made, that I repeated, Goethe's statement about talent developing in private as against the career developing in public, we believe that the actor must have a place where he can really, as we sometimes express it, fall flat on his face without being considered a failure.
Why would a star want to come to the actor's studio? We know that the studio is a place for young people to train, but what have the stars got to gain by coming there?
For the audience, stardom is the apex that anyone can aspire to. To the star or to the actor, stardom is a necessary part of his career, but not necessarily of the use of his talent. They are driven, motivated by some dream of what they will accomplish, of the use of their talent. And no amount of literal success is equivalent to the satisfaction that they get from the use of their talent. And when in one way or another they feel that, well, now that they're stars, sometimes they're even more troubled because they feel they're doing even less, they don't deserve it. That's why, by the way, there's so much disturbance and how should I say, suffering. And people say, what the hell have they got to suffer about? My God, give me those contracts.
Exactly.
They turn down those contracts. I'd like to have that trouble.
Yeah, right.
But the actors do have that trouble. Because, yes, they do get the contracts and they get the money, but they do not get the satisfaction which they sought when they went into the theater.
But it must be difficult to work with stars because they sort of have their images created for them and they have to live up to these images. With that in mind, how did you work with Marilyn Monroe?
We were fortunate, and I must say it's one of the sadness of my life and career that the audience could not see, and now can never see, what we were privileged to see. Not to think, not to make up, not to theorize, but to see. Miss Monroe worked in my classes, by the way, in the regular classes, and she also worked at the Actors Studio. And I must tell you that at the Actors Studio, there was a great deal of exactly this kind of feeling. She's a star, how does she come here, and so on, until she got up and she did a scene from Anna Christie with Maureen Stapleton. And we are accustomed to saying that somehow on the screen she carried a light with her, the screen would light up, and it's true, We think it's done with the lights and the blonde and so on. Well, on the stage, or rather, this wasn't even the stage, this was just an ordinary thing. We didn't even have theatrical lights. The quality that she lit up is impossible to describe, and I really wish that the audience could have seen, if only a little of that.
Lee, how do you see yourself in terms of the new theater, the people who somehow have been working in a different method from yours? For example, the Living Theater, or Grotowski, or Brooke, Joe Chaikin, and Andre Gregory.
We are now capable of seeing more than one thing. We do not have to limit ourselves to only one form of seeing. You see, we can appreciate Rembrandt, and we can appreciate Picasso, and we can appreciate, you know, some of the even more modern of today. And you can choose. All of these things have a value. Theater, in one way or another, is a reflection of reality, sometimes of an inner reality, not of a social reality, that has its value, you see. And I believe, therefore, that the theater of the future is one in which the actor should be sufficiently trained so that he can do anything that is demanded of him from our point of view, or from the additional, call it Grotowski or whatever point of view, which only means, from my point of view, adding certain technical skills and so on and so forth.
The Actors Studio has had its glory, but it's also had its critics. Many in the theater have complained that the studio has dominated the American theater with performances that have now become stereotypes of their own. That studio actors are mannered and unable to do roles other than those that dramatize their own personalities. True, method acting at the studio is based primarily on interior characterizations, and there's been little or no work done on the body or the voice. But there's no doubt that the method, as practiced by Lee Strasberg or by others, has made its mark. It has had an enormous influence on the American theater and on American actors. It has provided them with a basic and legitimate technique. Surely the method was radical in its day, and surely there's plenty of controversy surrounding it today. But those who need it will have a fundamental approach at their command, and those who reject it are free to build something new.